Welcome to Just Relationships, the show that offers you concrete ways to make your relationships better. Whether it's your boss, your spouse, your children, or your friends, the quality of your relationships in life directly affects how you feel about yourself and the success you achieve. Your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer, a psychotherapist, telecoach, author, and seminar leader, will interview top experts to help you learn to manage this essential part of your life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer.
Greetings. Welcome back to Just Relationships. If you tuned in last week, you know we are looking at a very amazing question about changing other people. We all seem to want other people to change, and we want to be right. And as I had said last week, the old adage, you can't change other people, you can only change yourself. And if you tuned in, you know I am interviewing Peter Bregman and Howie Jacobson, authors of You Can Change Other People, okay? Can, highlighted in yellow, the 4 steps to help your colleagues, employees, even family up their game. So just to recap, thank you. Welcome back, Peter and Howie. I appreciate you being here, giving me the interview. The idea is that we all look at getting our own needs met. And when we're looking for positive change management for another person, we're looking at helping them get their needs met. Yet the comment that you two made last week was about the mutuality of relationships, and both people want to get their needs met. And we can look at understanding what another person wants and needs. How do we do that? We're not reading their minds. We're not analyzing them. We're asking them plenty of questions. And we're showing that we're an ally, not a critic. And unfortunately, most people move into shaming and blaming to try to control people, to get them to do what they want them to do, which of course we know doesn't work, but many people don't know of an alternative. And I hope they have the faculty for the alternative. It would make sense to be willing to try an alternative, because if you do look at somebody else's needs and helping them get their needs met, then what goes around comes around. It's very circular. As you said last week, Howie, right? The circle of the altruism and selfishness, and the quoting the Dalai Lama. And, let's face it, Mother Teresa got her jollies from helping people, right? Now, is the average person that altruistic? Parents generally are a lot more altruistic, although parents can be blindsided as well. Are managers that altruistic? What I love about your book is that you give examples from both the work life and personal life. So, but would you see a distinction, Peter and Howie, would you see a distinction between a professional relationship and a familial or a family relationship in this regard?
There's always, there are definitely differences between a family relationship and a professional relationship. You can't fire your children. And I mean, I guess you can sort of fire your spouse and partner, people are in incredibly dysfunctional relationships and functional relationships in family and at work. But there are ways in which they're similar also. Right. And what a parent wants for their child in the most functional of ways is to grow and develop the child so that they are independently capable and go out into the world. Like, that's what they want. That's what a manager wants in a functional relationship between a manager and employee, that they build an independently capable team, because otherwise the manager is going to be doing all the work of their employees, right? And then they're not going to be able to do any higher level work. In the work that Howie and I do in the C-suite, one of the things that we help executives do is to create time for themselves to focus on strategy, to focus on, blue sky thinking, on big picture things. It's very, very hard if they're doing all of the work all the time, if they're managing all of the work, if they're spending all of their time, fixing mistakes and trying to be on top of people. So, one of the goals is, how do I develop an independently capable team? How do I develop independently capable children? Like that's really the same goal. And we do it by being their ally, by supporting them, by helping them make their own decisions and helping them think through those decisions in a way so that they're identifying outcomes that they want to achieve, and they're finding opportunities even in the problems that they're facing. And then they're creating plans that they can move forward with in confidence, so that not necessarily in confidence that it's going to succeed, but in confidence that they're going to follow through on those plans, right? And then they're going to learn from that, and like a game of action and reflection. And so in that way, the job of a parent is very similar to the job of a manager. Very,
very well put. I'm thinking about a typical scenario of a parent. We're looking at peanut butter and jelly management. There's actually a business book called Peanut Butter and Jelly Management, making the point that there are a lot of similarities between managing children and reports. So the child wants the sweets, and the parents say, no, you can't have that. It's before dinner, and eating sweets is bad for you. The child doesn't know from that. The parent would say, I want you to grow strong bones, and I want you to be really healthy. Meanwhile, children manage to be healthy, that eating junk food doesn't catch up with people for a long time. So the children feel perfectly fine. So I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but the idea of what the child wants is the sweets. The child doesn't relate to the idea of a healthy body, but the parent does. So how do you get on the same page with that?
So I would be cautious about applying that metaphor to employees who are all grown-ups, right? Like if you come in and you think, well, I know I'm the visionary leader of this organization and these people are under me and they don't see the big picture, then, it's your job to help them see the big picture and assume that, if you're hiring people who are incapable of doing that, that's your problem, not theirs. Where I do think that sort of inner toddler becomes really important is, let's say, like I have a toddler inside of me that wants and demands things right away. So like I could, last week when Peter was demonstrating the being the son in conversation with the father, I could feel my toddler wanting to have a temper tantrum. Like if I had been in Peter's shoes, right? So the toddler wants instantaneous relief or pleasure and doesn't think about the big picture. So I think what we want to do as leaders, as managers, is to cultivate in ourselves the space to have that toddler be allowed to speak without determining our behaviors, and to create environments in which other people can also make that choice.
I love that term, cultivating the space. I'm thinking about, I love also and use the term holding the space for another human being. So are you saying, Howie, the idea of giving the toddler or the child ability to speak about how much they want those sweets in that moment, or no? What are you saying?
I mean, it's there. And when I try to deny it, so whether it's in myself or I tell someone else, I can't hear what you're saying right now, I refuse to hear what you're saying, that just amplifies it. So, what Peter taught me when we started working together 23 years ago was people don't resist change, they resist being changed.
Yes.
So if there's some part of me that's not acceptable that I have to experientially delete or avoid, that's going to consume all of my energy. But if I say, you know what, there's a part of me that has this, inclination right now, and it's screaming, and I can just be with it. The same way, like I was at the car dealership getting my car repaired, and there was this TV show that I'd never seen before, and people are screaming at each other. It's like a political show. And I'm sitting there thinking, this is kind of like my mind. And I don't have to listen to these people. I don't have to agree with them. I don't have to go out and do what they say, but I can't turn them off. they're there. And
Right.
it was kind of like, I can have that same relationship with my own thoughts and feelings. And, the first step to go from critic to ally involves us being allies of ourselves first.
Yes.
Saying,
yes.
you know what? There is this cacophony inside me, and there are voices that want me to do things that I know are not good for me. And it's okay that they're there.
Right.
And it's hard that they're there. And I can still, when I say hold the space or cultivate the space, it really means they can be there. Because if I pretend they're not, then they're going to run the show.
Yes. Can be there, can be fully seen and heard. And and so I really want that now. It's not going to interfere with dinner. I promise I'm going to eat all the good food, but I really want this now. So you would say,
yeah, some part of me wants this now. And and I, as an adult with agency, I get to decide whether that part wins or not.
Right. And it's interesting. What you're describing, Howie, is actually in my language, it's called an internal family system, that we all have different parts and we all have an executive or a nurturer or a teacher or a parent inside of us that manages to orchestrate the different parts that can be very triggered. So that is actually my field of study as a psychotherapist. So it's very interesting to me that you bring this up, and I hope it's interesting to our audience, because we really do have parts, and some parts get triggered. And as one of you mentioned last week, we get triggered from past traumas, and then we're not able to think very clearly at all. Anyway, you also talk about in your book getting permission from the other to have a change conversation. And in your formula of getting permission, you talk about starting out with empathy. And it's so obvious that if somebody's going rah, 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 and you want to say rah, 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 back, to say, oh, I can see you're really upset about this because you wanted it A and the other person did it B, and you had agreed on doing it A with the other person, and they just ignored you. And I can see why you would be upset about that. Yeah. So then what? So you do that, and people are going to have a much more positive response, would you say?
Yeah, I'm going to add something to it, which I think is helpful in all of these conversations, which is to own everything you can. If you're the one leading the change conversation, you want to sort of change someone, own everything that you could possibly own.
Yes.
So like, rather than, it's actually the opposite of defending. Like, rather than sort of defend your behavior, which sort of every part of you wants to do, to say, what about what this person is saying is true, and can I own it? And then, but don't make it about you, shift the conversation back to them. So if you think about maybe Howie could do this with the internally family system, like in his own head around it, although now we're asking for levels of metacognition. But when I think about the conversation that we had last week, we were talking about a 21-year-old whose father was very upset with him because he wasn't working the way his father wanted. His father worked and studied really hard, and he was watching the son, and he considered the son to be lazy, and he considered the son, to not study. In that moment, if the goal is for the son to change how the father is approaching him, right? To be able to say, I could also see how, like, it takes me a while to get to work. Like, I do all these things to avoid work, and then I get to work finally at like 2 a.m, and then I don't get enough sleep. I see that. I don't love that aspect too, but it's hard for me to work in a crowded house. It's hard for me to focus until everybody's asleep. Like, I struggle with that. So yeah, I totally can see how the way I kind of manage my own abilities looks super like lazy and procrastinating.
Yeah.
That's a word, procrastinating. I just made it up, but I think it
You
should
just made it up. I love it. So common, right? Procrastinating. Well, I found that section of your book, You Too, so refreshing. Okay. And this is Dr. Duffy Spencer, and I am interviewing Peter Bregman and Howie Jacobson, who wrote, You Can Change Other People, the 4 steps to help your colleagues, employees, even family up their game. So the idea of owning everything, Peter, and I love it in the scripts that you had in your book of, I made mistakes too. Yep. And I apologize for that.
That was Howie's voice.
Really? You're kidding.
I don't make mistakes.
Peter doesn't make mistakes.
I don't make mistakes. That was Howie.
That was Howie.
I was like, if I did make a mistake, how would I talk about it?
If I did, that's why Howie and I wrote the book together. We complement each other. No, I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding.
Yes. Well, I have to tell you, in all the years I've been teaching managers how to manage teams for 25 years. And when I suggest these kinds of things about owning your mistakes and being vulnerable, they're like, what? No way. I'm the manager. Or even parents, to be vulnerable, to own a mistake to a child. Well, sometimes you have to if the mistake is so severe and the child really knows it. I heard one parent say, people make mistakes. Didn't say I made a mistake, but people make mistakes. And that's better than nothing, right? That's better than nothing. But I so agree with you that this is key to own everything. And how hard it is, though, because we've all been taught not to be vulnerable, right?
But it's much more easy. It's much easier for me to be vulnerable when someone else is vulnerable first.
Yes.
So like to some extent, we don't want to talk about like this as like a superpower that only a privileged few people can, like a leader in an organization or in a family, like is the one who goes first, who literally leads. So whatever your fiefdom, whether you're the CEO or you're the manager of a particular division, you can create a culture, a cascading culture of ownership and vulnerability by demonstrating it. And by demonstrating, because what people are afraid of is if I am vulnerable and I admit a mistake, then everyone's going to dogpile on me. And because no one else has made any mistakes.
Right.
So in a culture where it's understood that we are human, where owning is something that is valued and appreciated and rewarded, then we get to see that owning our mistakes doesn't have to come with a cost. But in lots of environments, owning our mistakes means we are vulnerable, which means woundable, and we get wounded. So
yes,
go first. If you want to live in that world, I think something that we wrote at the end of the book that came straight from Peter's heart was like, we wrote this book because this is the world we want to live in.
Right, and I'm just thinking in the assertiveness training field, which I am very involved in, there is a name for what you're describing, and just to let you know, people know, the skill is called negative assertion, which is you're right, I was wrong. Okay, so I assert that I have the right to make mistakes. And then there's another skill called negative inquiry. So if somebody is giving us awful negative feedback, to ask for more of it, but specifically, so that they're not fogging us. And will tell me exactly what you didn't like about that report. I want to learn. I'm eager to learn. So I think that negative inquiry is a very brave skill. And I think negative assertion, you're right, I was wrong, or I was wrong, not even saying you're right, is a very, very, very brave skill. I love how you put that, Howie, that when we're looking at vulnerability, we're looking at woundability, that a wound, even a CEO is woundable, right? In my private practice, I have CEOs. I have very, very highly ranking people who share with me their vulnerability. And some of them are able to share their vulnerability with others, which is what makes them such excellent leaders, I think. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we all had permission to just be human? I found that hurtful.
Yeah, I have been thinking a lot about this recently, Dr. Duffy, and I actually think it's very, like, wouldn't it be amazing if we could all be human? And it is very human to defend with armor our vulnerabilities. Like, it's also very human. And I've been thinking a lot about, like, why we do that. Like, why we do that. And it's hard to not get a little spiritual here in the conversation, because, like, we come out as these, like, pure souls in little fragile bodies. And then all these things come at us, and certain things don't feel good. And the things that don't feel good actually feel super, super risky, because in the fragile bodies that we're in, if someone, if my parents stop taking care of me or don't want to take care of me, I'm going to die. It is literally life or death. And,
exactly.
And then we grow up, and it's sort of like that moment in the car with my parents where I'm, my mother's crying and I'm saying, why am I doing this? Like, there's nothing I have to defend against. I could just make my own choices and make my own decisions and let other people make their choices and make their own decisions. And I think possibly our most important task as human beings on this planet, like, as some people say, like, sort of spiritual beings in bodies, material, like this dynamic of being a soul in a material world. Like, what is our task? In some ways, our biggest task is to move through this world in a way where we can be clear and compassionate and connected to other people, and not thrown off of that mission by things people say or do that we feel like we need to defend against because it may be dangerous to us, when in reality, it's actually not that dangerous to us. It's dangerous to our egos. It's dangerous to our self-concepts. It's dangerous to kind of how we would like the world to view us, but it's not actually dangerous to us. And I think the people who are, and I aspire to this, like, the people who are able to, like, be clear and be compassionate and be connected and courageously stand in, the fullness of who they are in the face of criticism, are the most powerful people in the world, and simultaneously the most vulnerable people in the world. I think that's powerful. We may have stepped a little bit off the full topic of the book, but the book itself is about, how do I engage with people with that kind of connection and confidence and sensitivity?
I think it's on point, Peter, because I think it takes a lot of strength and a lot of courage to be vulnerable. And as you're saying that, it sounds so wonderful to stay clear and compassionate and connected, to stay with ourselves. But I'm thinking, how many people don't have that sense of self-advocacy, self-care, self-respect, self-love, because they were mistreated. 100%.
Yeah. I think what we're saying in the book, well, to tie this together with the book, You Can Change Other People, is the first thing we want to do is make sure that we are showing up in that way.
Yeah.
And to the extent that we're helping other people change, we want to do it in a way that doesn't incite their resistance and set off their armor. What we want to do is in a way that doesn't, like that moment in the Marvel comics where Iron Man, I can't remember what his name is when he's not Iron Man. But when maybe Howie does, Tony Stark. So when Tony Stark sees danger, right?
Yeah.
What's the first thing he does? He like hits this button or he does something, and suddenly like all this armor and all this power comes up to him. And I never really thought about it until this moment. So thank you for bringing it up in me, Dr. Duffy. But like, that's what we do. Like, that's what we do in life. Like we go into battle, we hit a button, all the armor comes up, and now we're indestructible. Except, by the way, when we start fighting, everyone's going to look for our weak spots, right, in the armor.
Yes.
And how powerful is it to not hit that button and to move through life without the armor, but also being invincible? More, maybe Wonder Woman than Iron Man, or Superman than Iron Man.
Yeah. I'll take my copper bracelets.
Exactly.
And something I've discovered, and Peter, we haven't actually talked about this, but like one of the things I didn't realize was brave about writing the book is having family members who know I wrote this book.
Oh,
and who are like, like what you just said to me, is that in your book? Like, right. So it's almost like we were talking about people who have been mistreated, and for all of us, there are levels at which I can be vulnerable. Like when I make a mistake at the cashier at the store, it's very easy for me. It's hard, with clients, it might be a little bit harder. With family members, with my kids, with my spouse, it can be the hardest of all. But I think of life in some ways as like the gym, where I can build the muscles that I'm going to need in harder and harder situations. So, I can lift some weights, but if I try to lift, certain weights or do certain exercises, I'll pull my back out. I'll hurt myself. But after a few months, right? So like I want to encourage people to think about, for each of us, what's our gym routine to be able to be vulnerable.
Wow. And on that note, we have to close. And I think that's such an important point, Howie, the idea of levels. And to start small, as they say, start small steps, maybe one self-disclosure, one honest self-disclosure, and one honest question of another without judgment. And what is it you really want? And I was so touched when Peter, you were modeling how the young man could say, I do struggle, Dad. I do struggle. So how lovely if we can really, really do that and work together. So thank you, Peter Bregman and Howie Jacobson, authors of You Can Change Other People, the 4 steps to help your colleagues, employees, even family up their game. I have to say this has been such an excellent 2 shows. This series of 2, and I can't thank you 2 enough for being with me and being with our people on Just Relationships. I hope you come back.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been really a delight, and you brought out nice things in us that we don't always talk about in interviews. So I appreciate that.
You're so welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Duffy. This was fun.
You're so welcome. And this is Dr. Duffy Spencer saying goodbye for now and wishing you great relationships.